Is there a difference between How Arcane Writes Women and How Arcane Writes Men? So that was the question on my mind after making my How Arcane Writes Women video, when I predictably got a ton of requests to do a video on How Arcane Writes Men. I hadn't planned on making that video, and I didn't know what the answer was. I didn't know if there was a difference, but then once I thought about it even a little bit, I was like, of course, there's not only a big difference, there's something pretty profound going on here. So let's compare some things. For women, we get these gender-defying characters. Ambessa, Grace, and Savika are very masculine women, and nearly everything about them, from their appearances to their personalities to their societal roles, are traditionally masculine. And they're not devoid of femininity, but their masculinity is very prominent and very encompassing. We do not get equivalents for this for the men. As far as personalities and societal roles, we get men who are less masculine in these regards, men who are not fighters, for example, but no men who are overtly feminine in any traditional or even stereotypical way. We do not, for example, get a Sanji, a male cook, a provider who's all about providing sustenance for his crew, for his family, basically. Or in terms of his personality, a romantic. We don't see that in Arcane. We do not get a Ruby Rod who's all about beauty, a celebrity male sex symbol. This is a guy who lives in this dramatic space. He's a performer, he thrives on the love of his fans, he wears roses and lipstick, he seduces people with his beauty and his sexuality.
Must be my sexuality.
And he's not about the action at all. The whole subversion of this character is that he's a man. It's unexpected given all these qualities. And if we're talking image, we get the same difference. For women, we have this wide range. The trio on one end, Mel on the other, characters like Vi in between. For the men, Vander is our super masculine guy. Jayce is a little more towards that end. And then everyone else is smack in the middle, in that neutral zone. We don't get any men with a feminine image in our male cast. We get a couple bit characters who fit that, so a bit of a mix, but again, it's not that prominent trio we get with the women. Now, do not mistake what I'm saying here for critique. I'm not saying Arcane needed some feminine man for representation reasons, anything like that. I just want to know what accounts for the difference, since we did see something different with the women. What is going on there? So, like we said before, there is gendery stuff they're doing with the men. And what I noticed was that the masculinity-defying aspects of Arcane weren't just quieter and subtler, they were different in what they were. They were not whole personalities, roles, images, not these character-encompassing things. They were moments, they were behaviors, they were aspects of character image. Jayce gets this scene of emotional vulnerability. Silco gets this scene of him applying cosmetics, this aspect of his image. Ekko gets a scene where he cries. Viktor gets a scene where he cries. Vander gets a damsel in distress scene. These are all moments. Jayce's personality isn't being emotionally vulnerable and talking about his feelings and insecurities all the time. He gets this one scene. Silco isn't this pretty princess makeup guru. No, he applies concealer or whatever it is for his facial scar. Ekko cries once, Viktor cries once, Vander needs to be saved once. So what's all this about? Why moments? Why this difference? So I think this isn't a difference in amount, it's a total difference in what they're addressing by the male characters. It's something very specific, and the way they're addressing it is perfectly suited to what the issue is. So be a man is this thing that boys and men hear throughout their whole lives. Sometimes it's this general life advice thing, but more often it's something said to us in specific moments. Moments when we are not being a man. Men get told us when they cry, when they display emotional vulnerability, when they want to quit something. Moments of weakness, moments of failure, sadness, self-pity. And if you think about what that means, how it plays out, you can have a guy who is masculine in every way under the sun. The guy is a lumberjack, soldier, bodybuilder who clocks in every day and doesn't whine about the physical burdens he bears. He just grows his beard and sweats and farts and drinks beer with the boys and bears it all like a man. And then, if he cries, he's emasculated. It's a little moment, but even little moments like that threaten the person's entire masculinity. In hyper-masculine circles, you just don't live those moments down. You become the crybaby, the sissy boy, God forbid the guy who lost to a girl. There's also a standard involving capabilities. Can you throw a football? Can you change a tire? Sexual prowess. Being unable to do one of these things threatens an individual's masculinity as a whole by these traditional standards. So it comes out that being a man isn't a sum-total type of phenomenon. It's a standard of purity phenomenon. And purity, I know, is an odd word to use. I don't mean moral purity, I mean like absence of impurity, like a pure metal or a pure chemical. You are not allowed to cry, ever. You are not allowed to be weak, ever. Be vulnerable, ever. Give up, ask for help, be in certain submissive positions, especially in relation to women. And if you're caught in one of these situations, if you're caught being unable to perform one of the skills on the man's skill set list, that is going on your masculinity permanent record. And you know, it makes you wonder if this is the reason there's no feminine version of the word emasculate. But it could be for this reason. It could be because threatening masculinity with moments like this is a prominent thing with masculinity, and with femininity it either doesn't work the same way or it doesn't exist as prominently. Armchair etymology for sure, but the threat phenomenon is a real thing with masculinity, and I think the theory matches up very well. This is what Arcane is addressing. With women, the focus was expanding the idea of women's roles and images and personalities, because that's a core subject about women that society is grappling with right now. With men, I do see some people talking about expanding roles and image in that same way, but what I see a lot more of is discussion about this be a man standard, this purity test aspect of masculinity, how easily threatened it is, how to shape it into something more durable. And that's what Arcane chose to make central to how it wrote its male characters. It showed those characters going through moments like that, unmasculine moments when they engage in behavior that would threaten traditional masculinity, moments when they're in emasculating situations, and then we see them all come out on the other side with their masculinity fully intact, functioning at 100%. Jayce has this vulnerable moment curling up in Mel's lap, talking about his feelings, and then after that he has by far his most masculine scenes. Viktor has a number of emotionally vulnerable moments, this one being the most hysterical, so to speak, and then he sucks it up and he takes responsibility. Vander has this embarrassing moment with Civica, and then he's a damsel in distress, and then after that he has his big macho muscle powerhouse moment. Ekko has his moment of vulnerability, followed by his boy savior moment. Heimerdinger, the pattern doesn't fit exactly, but he still gets a pretty emasculating moment. He's walking alone in a scary neighborhood, and he is freaked out. Women are usually the ones having that experience, not exclusively of course. I've lived in terrible neighborhoods, and I've experienced this many times, and it is emasculating. But here we see Heimerdinger do this, and he's still Heimerdinger after all is said and done. He comes out of it fully capable. So enough of the characters follow this trend, and this emasculation mechanism is a real phenomenon about masculinity. I think it's fair to say that this is what they were addressing. Very different from what they're doing with the women. And I think it's because women have different gender-related issues and struggles, and because femininity works differently. It makes sense. You have different genders, you have different tools, different methods to express those differences. And I want to take a moment here to address a sentiment I think people need to be careful about. I saw about 200 of these comments on my women video. Arcane writes women as people. Why is writing women regarded as so different from writing men? Just write the characters, damn it. How to write a good woman? Write a good character without thinking about their gender, and then say that they're women. Bam, women are people. How to write good women? Write them like any other character. So this is an approach you could take. Arcane did not do this. The whole point of my video was that the writers put a lot of work into their female characters specifically. There were a lot of rules they put in place and diligently followed. They built their world with a culture that supported a specific vision for gender. The way other characters were written was modified to support certain themes of gender. Write women as people, nothing wrong with that idea. It's great as a slogan, but as writing advice, it comes off as simplification of a topic that deserves a lot of attention. And that's not because of the women part. This video you're watching now is all about how writing men is also a topic that deserves a lot of attention. And there are men-specific problems to address and men-specific tools to use to address them. And that's true for any category. If I'm writing a child character or an old person, hearing write old people as people won't give me much guidance. What I think the sentiment of these comments is trying to say is don't make gender the focus of character. Ground everything in realness. That's all fine. That's great. The readings of this phrase that concern me are gender isn't an important quality to factor into how you write a character. That's not good advice. Stop overcomplicating the topic of writing women. Not helpful advice. The methods for writing better female characters are applications of the same rules for writing any good character. Not true advice. For any category, male, female, old, young, poor, rich, human, alien, I would say the same thing. Learn about the qualities of your characters, learn problems you can address with your characterization, learn specific methods to showcase those qualities effectively. These are all tools you can use to improve your craft. And these rules and methods and techniques can be complicated. They can be counterintuitive. They can be very different from how writing other types of characters works. And a guiding mantra that makes any of it sound kind of self-evident should be relegated to just that, a guiding mantra. A little reminder to steer you back on track sometimes, but not actual writing advice. With the comments on my video, I could tell a lot of them were just using it as I'm suggesting, as a slogan, as a mantra, but some of them weren't, so I wanted to give my 2 cents there. Okay, onward. So emasculating moments, this is where I was at a bit with my understanding, but then I was digging a bit deeper and I noticed that this is part of a much broader theme that encompasses a lot more. So another difference between how Arcane does men and women is stereotypes. Arcane took a lot of care in avoiding negative stereotypes with women. Some it avoided entirely, like hysteria and fragility. Some it subverted or neutralized, like Manic Pixie Dream Girl, Damsel in Distress, Heart of the Story. Some it just painted in a negative light, like submissiveness, dependence on men. And with men, there are also certain stereotypes that were avoided entirely, aggressive sexual behavior, certain types of measuring contests. We didn't see any of that, but otherwise, no, they didn't avoid stereotypes much at all with men. Arcane's men embody very stereotypically male flaws, and I want to talk about 5 of these. Jayce has a gigantic ego that causes him to blunt force his way through every problem. Heimerdinger is hyper-logical. He views everything like a mathematical equation, like a science experiment, so much so that he can't see the humanity struggling right under his nose, or over his nose in his case, because he's a yordle and is therefore small. Viktor is subtler, a bit more speculative. I think Viktor's flaw is that he suppresses his emotions. His whole life is about sucking it up. You're from the Undercity? Suck it up, find a way to get into the academy. You're stuck in an assistant role? Suck it up and find a way to have a big breakthrough. You have no friends? Suck it up. You're sick? Suck it up. Gonna die? Suck it up. His outer persona is cool as a cucumber, nose to the grindstone, do what you gotta do. It's all very be a man, but if you keep sucking it up, if you ignore all these emotions that want to be felt about his sickness, his death, his legacy, those emotions don't just go away. They'll bubble up eventually and they'll come back at the worst time. Why does he see that he's out of shimmer and then just use the hex core anyway? He knows how it works. He knows the hex core kills if he doesn't use shimmer. It's not like he couldn't procure more, if not immediately, at least at some point from Singed. So why not just wait? It's because he's desperate. We're seeing his emotional dam break right here. This is everything. He's pent up, hitting him like a storm. He's anxious, he's desperate, he's hopeful, he's afraid. And in that storm of anxiety and hope, he makes a stupid mistake. As one does when very personal emotions overcome you during a very technical process. So Viktor, we have suppresses emotions, a very stereotypical male problem. Vander is a character whose main struggle we're seeing the end of. Seems like he was this very violent person that led to his downfall, and that's unfortunately also a stereotypical male behavior of violence. Marcus is similar. Rage seems like one of his core struggles. Now, very often when stories address themselves to stereotypically male flaws like the ones I listed, we get a blanket condemnation. Male ego needs to be tempered. Male rage and violence needs to be neutered. Sucking it up is a bad thing. Hyperlogical men need to abandon that way of seeing the world. Or, other times, it's completely embraced. Be violent, get mad, suck it up, etc. Typical Arcane, we see an incredibly balanced portrayal, a balanced judgment of these characteristics. In Arcane, when a man develops and succeeds, he doesn't develop out of that stereotypically male flaw, he develops with it intact. Jayce never stops being egotistical, he just changes how he's egotistical.
With respect, I don't give a shit what any of you think of me anymore.
And his triumphant solution at the end of his arc is just as hasty and brute-forced and boneheaded as everything he's done.
He paid in gold and didn't even haggle.
The boy didn't even haggle.
Viktor never stops sucking it up. He does some wallowing after Sky's death. He wallows in sadness, wallows in self-pity, wallows in existential pity, but then he sucks up and goes right back to action. Cool, stone-faced as ever. We see none of what he just went through in this scene. Heimerdinger's hyperlogical approach prevented him from connecting with people, but the way he solved that problem, very scientific. He saw he was wrong about something, and then he went off to gather more data. This is exactly what a scientist should do. He stays hyperlogical Heimerdinger, and he succeeds with his logic. Vander does stop being violent, and then he realizes that that isn't the right approach, so he engages his flaw. He takes up arms again, he uses violence. This time striking the exact balance he needs to and not a bit more. And then Marcus is the inverse. Old Marcus would have blown himself and Silco to hell in a fiery self-righteous rage. But because he's no longer as rash as he used to be, he never achieves this triumphant moment that was waiting for him. Arcane openly does associate male stereotypes with its men. It doesn't shy away from that. It does not condemn those qualities as problematic. It also does not revere them as ideal. It shows these qualities being expressed without belittling them. It doesn't show its male characters discarding male stereotypes in favor of feminine stereotypes. And this is all very similar to what we talked about with women and emotions. Arcane does not belittle emotions by portraying them as weak and hysterical, but it lets its female characters have these moments. With men, though, it goes further. It's not just about letting these moments happen without judgment. Instead, it fully explores the benefits and detriments of these qualities. It gives fair and nuanced judgment to them, all in the context of validating them. Very balanced and very accurate as well, I think. Sometimes it's good to be a stubborn, egotistical idealist. Sometimes you achieve a lot by sucking it up. Sometimes violence is the answer. And if you think you're starting to see an overarching theme here, yeah, this is about when I started to see it as well. Arcane's overall theme when it comes to masculinity is validation. It's showing all of these emasculating moments are okay. It's okay to have moments like this. Those moments don't mean you're not a man. They don't disconnect you from your masculinity or prevent you from doing what you need to do. And it shows a variety of typically masculine ways of relating to the world. It shows the limits of those qualities, but then it also shows that there's nothing wrong or invalid about the qualities themselves. You can fail with them, pick yourself back up, and then use those same qualities successfully. But this validation theme goes further. In-story validation is also the theme. Arcane's men seek validation from each other, from the people around them, from society. Viktor seeks validation from humanity in the form of a legacy. All of Jayce's conflicts with people are from them not validating him. Not validating his science, not validating the direction he wants to take his science, not validating his political decisions, and his final triumph is rejecting validation from anyone but himself. But it's in men's relationships that we see this theme explored most fully. Brotherhood in Arcane is about finding mutual empowerment through validation. Jayce and Viktor's mutual validation, their belief in each other despite what society will do to them if they fail, that's what gives them the fortitude to develop Hextech. He's hurt by his mother not validating him. He's hurt by Caitlyn's family not validating him. Viktor sees his vision and judges it worthy. Having that one voice of validation, that's what's important to Jayce. And we see it from the other side too. Viktor depends a lot on Jayce's validation.
Jayce will understand.
Silco and Vander were brothers in arms, they shared the same vision, and this scene shows that even after Vander betrayed him, Silco still needs Vander's validation for his plans. And later on in Act 3, he still seeks Vander's validation when it comes to fatherhood and Jayce's deal. And then you have fatherhood. Fatherhood in Arcane is all about cultivating power in your child, but validation always plays a central role in that. With Silco, you have him teaching and guiding Jinx, removing impediments to power, and then telling her what she needs to hear to empower her, a statement of validation.
You're perfect.
With Vander, you have him teaching Vi and guiding her how to use her power, but also encouraging her by validating her.
That's my girl.
Viktor is a character very much in search of a father figure, if not an actual father per se. First, we see Singe validating him.
Why aren't you playing with the others? Loneliness is often the byproduct of a gifted mind.
And he takes on that kind of role for Viktor. But then Viktor can't accept that validation in part because he can't reciprocate it. Heimerdinger is next, but his fatherhood doesn't provide adequate empowerment.
Do you think it was my life's ambition to be an assistant?
But that is his relationship, and we see validation again playing a central role later on.
You should be proud of what you've accomplished, Viktor.
And this is a bit character, but even Caitlyn's dad shows signs of playing this part.
She was doing what she thought was right.
In contrast, motherhood in Arcane is about protection at any cost. We see Mrs. Kierman with her extreme and violent reaction when she thinks Kate is in danger, and Bessa's whole career is about this if we take her at her word.
I couldn't endure the look in your eyes whenever I made the necessary decisions to keep us safe.
You have Jayce's mom, who as Jayce sees it kind of ruined his life, or wanted to ruin his life in order to protect him. And then you have the really interesting case, you have Vi. So Vi and everything else that she is a mix of masculine and feminine, and she is as well with parenthood. She's a mixture of a father and a mother to Powder. She is very clearly about cultivating power in Powder, encouraging her to be more physically capable.
Powder, look at me. What did I tell you? That I'm ready. That's right.
Encouraging her in her personal strengths.
What makes you different makes you strong.
And her goals for both Powder and herself reflect this empowerment theme.
You're stronger than you think. And one day, this city's gonna respect us.
And then obviously Vi is also Powder's protector, even in ways Powder doesn't always agree with or appreciate. After the time skip, we see Vi come out of prison with a very motherly role. She wants to protect Powder from Silco. But then her conflict evolves. And then her final dilemma is all about validating her sister or failing to validate her. Imagine if Vi had said you're perfect. But no, Jinx's other father got there first and he did his father's duty, and Jinx as his daughter did hers. Okay, so what's the upshot of all this? Why validation? Why is that such a pervasive theme here? So speculative, but my theory is that validation is the masculine form of professing love. It's this less emotive form of confirming that same bond. And if you think about it, it's like the stereotype of what men want to hear from their fathers isn't I love you, it's I'm proud of you, it's validation. The classic proverbial bond between men is the army buddy, who can wordlessly share a beer with you, and for your relationship that's a meaningful moment, despite zero expression of emotions. All of these typically male bonding moments are these reciprocation situations where no emotion is actually expressed, maybe even nothing is expressed between the two people. There's just this togetherness that implies I enjoy spending time with you, playing catch, going fishing, smoking a cigar together. This scene at the end with Jinx is the perfect scene for Silco to say I love you, but he doesn't. He says the male version of I love you. He validates her. Side note, this is also my theory for why Han and Leia's I love you, I know moment works, because I love you too doesn't fit Han's masculinity, but I know does. Why? Because it's validation. So Arcane showing these validation moments between characters is really exploring male love in a unique and very effective way, and exploring the themes of self-validation and also the story itself conferring validation on all these qualities that men might have. It's a very subtly meaningful way of connecting to its male audience. Very insightful, but so subtle that I would never realize this if I wasn't thinking into it this deeply. I feel it, and I did feel it, but I wouldn't be able to name it. So that's really my overarching theory here. Validation, I think it's what Arcane was trying to explore overall with so much of how it wrote all of these male characters. Okay, now some other very vital things. In the women's video, I talked about the big picture stuff, all the environmental things they did, like Amanda's quote about lack of stigma when it comes to sexuality and gender. There's one major thing they did that facilitated how they wanted to write men, but there's an interesting question with it. So the thing they did was choosing a culture within League's world that was already geared towards a relatively muted expression of masculinity. Piltover especially is a world that doesn't have a place for a Conan the Barbarian, for example. And Zaun too, both of these cultures value science and smarts. And in Zaun there is more of a place for dumb macho muscle, but either way for both Zaun and Piltover, you'll have pure aggression sublimated into these neutral qualities, ambition, willingness to take risks, a high value on intelligence and smarts and engineering, engineering abilities, and that'll make these places fertile ground for men who are less macho in terms of image, still functioning at a high level in society. A Viktor or Heimerdinger doesn't need some special reason why he's able to keep up. There's just no expectation of physical capabilities. You know, in Zaun you have characters like Ekko. Ekko is weak, but he makes up for it in this very Zaun Piltover way. Smarts and tech, it's how the whole world functions, it fits. And this is part of the larger topic of integration, which Arcane is always stellar at, that they didn't try to have a cast of Viktors and Heimerdingers and Ekkos and Singed in a place like Noxus, for example. They chose a place within their world where it would fit organically, where we would see this type of muted expression masculinity be the norm. And this integration phenomenon, of course, they're meticulous about on a micro level as well. Things like Silco's use of makeup, it's because he cares about his image, he doesn't want to appear weak, because physically he is pretty weak. And we see that throughout his whole character, he hides every sign of weakness. He's very obsessed with using presentation and image to manipulate people. You know, with Jayce you have this sheltered rich kid, of course he's going to be a bit soft sometimes. Scenes of the characters crying, all organic, failing, being embarrassed, all organic, all integrated. We don't have anything that's just there because here's what I think about gender, look at me. So Piltover's on, great choice if this is what they wanted to say about masculinity. Now my understanding is that most of League's world doesn't really fit this, so that makes me really curious to see what happens when we get to a place like Noxus, for example. That's kind of the big question here for me, that they're going to have a completely different way of exploring this in future seasons. And they already hinted at their approach here with a character like Kino, Mel's brother. He fits right into that society as the Fox, but there's a ton they'll be able to explore with like a full cast of fighter characters, and I'm so anxious to see what happens once we get to those parts of Runeterra. Obviously it's going to be good because it's Arcane, but yeah, I'm just so curious what they're going to do. Okay, now if you haven't seen my video about women, a lot of those things apply equally to the men, especially neutralization, which is showing typically gendered things happening with both genders to strip away the focus on gender so we can just care about the characters. I explore that in a lot of detail in the other video, so go watch that if you haven't. Also exploring men's relationships, not empowering men at the expense of women, and we talked a little bit about integration, character first design just now, so check that out if you want. All that applies very much to men as well. And let me know what you think about this topic, everyone, men and women. As a guy who made a whole thing about how women are treated in the show, I heartily invite women to do the same, share any and all opinions on the portrayal of men in Arcane, and portrayal of men in general, and men of course on a personal level. How do you feel about this topic and what Arcane did? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So like I said, I literally wasn't planning on making this video. I didn't think there was that much there. Even once I started having some thoughts, I didn't think it would be long enough for a full video, but I was totally wrong. There's absolutely a ton to talk about here. And I find it absolutely fascinating to uncover this stuff that I really think isn't supposed to be the focus at all. Things that are supposed to be in the background. That's some of my favorite stuff to bring to light. And despite this video and the other one, gender isn't really a topic I think about that much. I expected to learn a lot from the women video, and I did. I did not expect to learn so much from writing this video. I had never recognized how the be a man thing functioned. Now with this level of nuance, it's something Arcane literally taught me about my own gender through their presentation. Very cool experience for me. So the 50k Q&A video will go up next Sunday. Got a ton of great questions, very excited about that. Following Sunday will be another long video, 4 more shorts between now and then, so stay tuned for that. Support the Patreon, big thanks to everyone there, especially Evan Sanchez and Cat in a Beanbag. Thanks so much, appreciate the support as always. So thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.